Welcome, viewers. This is part of an interview series with candidates of 2021 Sikyong elections who've officially announced to run for the highest office of the Tibetan polity. I'm Choekyi Lhamo, and today we have with us Kelsang Dorjee Aukatsang, who was the former North America representative to His Holiness the Dalai Lama from 2013 to 16, and prior to that, he was a special advisor to Sikyong from 2011 to 13. Kedar Aukatsang was also the Chief Resilience Officer of the Central Tibetan Administration and served as the Director of Social and Resource Development Fund SAD until recently. Thank you for your time. Let's get
Thank
on with
you.
the questions. So the first question will be about the dialogue between the Tibetan and Chinese sides, which have been stalled since 2010. How do you plan to restart talks between the two sides, and what new steps have you planned to resolve the Tibetan issue?
First of all, thank you, Shukila, and thank you, Payu. Good to be with you all. Yeah, the whole reason why CTA exists is to really advance the Tibetan freedom struggle and to resolve the Tibet issue peacefully and through dialogue. And as you rightly pointed out, it's been now almost 10 years since the official interaction between His Holiness's representative and Beijing has stalled. So I think, as I've been saying, with in my meetings and discussions with the community since I announced my candidacy on September 2nd, I really think we need to be more proactive because we're now at a stage right now where we seem to be waiting. So we need to put more pressure on the Chinese government and just provide some incentives and make it a little bit more of a give them some reasons, right, to get into this mindset and this environment of where they need to engage with us, with the Tibetans. And I mean, it's been the policy of the Chinese government. They obviously don't recognize the Sikyong, they don't recognize the CTA. So all the 9 rounds of the formal meetings so far have been between the Chinese government representative and the representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I think that will remain in the near future as well. So what we need to do is, I think we need to be more proactive. We need to really get more into kind of this space of organizing more activities, putting more pressure, because as the Chinese policy in the last several months have so clearly shown, that China only respects pressure, China only respects strength. If you are, if you are meek, if you appear weak, they just will totally, trample and crush you. So I think we need to get more into activism. I think CTA as an organization really needs to transition from being less administration into more of this freedom movement kind of entity. So the more activities we can do, the more initiatives we can launch politically, and the more pressure we can build, that will enhance the possibility of, I think, the resumption of dialogue. And, that's really the only way, because we really have to be more aggressive, be more active, and over the next several weeks, months and years, and especially if I get this opportunity to become the Sikyong, you will see a very active phase of a lot of activities, a lot of campaigns, because that's what we need to do. That's where we need to go. Otherwise, if we just wait and watch and just constantly be reacting, then I think the chances of dialogue happening is going to be very slim.
You spoke of incentives. Do we have any incentives to offer Beijing move more incentive than seeking autonomy?
Well, see, the one thing that the Chinese government has always set as a condition for the resumption of dialogue is that they have always demanded that we accept that Tibet was always a part of, China since antiquity, right? That's the exact language. So it's very, very clear that even though Beijing holds all of the cards in terms of, they invaded, they occupied, they are in control, not a thing can happen inside Tibet, without any changes in China's policy. So they obviously have all the cards. But one thing that they don't have, Choekyi, is legitimacy. They don't have legitimacy. They don't trust the Tibetans. That's why they have this policy of repression. And as we all know, not a single Tibetan has been appointed in any meaningful position of power inside Tibet, right? Be it TAR or other parts of Tibet. So that clearly indicates that there is a lot of fear, a lot of concern about. Deep down, I think the Chinese leadership is aware that what they've done, in Tibet, since 49, 59, and since then is illegal. They don't have any moral right, any legitimacy in being in Tibet. So that's why they constantly raise this condition of us Tibetans having to accept, Chinese Tibet being a part of China, forever. So that's one thing I think we need to deny because one of my major aspects of at least the political aspect in terms of how do we advance the freedom struggle is we need to embrace our past as an independent nation, as an independent people. So we cannot shy away from that because if we do that, then we are giving the one remaining thing which we really have in our control. And then after that, there's nothing else to give to the Chinese. So if I become the Sikyong, I will initiate a major campaign to really, first of all, to remember our past as an independent nation, as an independent people, and then most importantly, to celebrate, to remember and to educate our people as well as the international community about Tibet's past as an independent, nation. And this, as I've been telling the community, it will only support the current official policy of, resolving the Tibet issue, through middle way. So I think there is no contradiction between accepting Tibet's past as an independent nation and embracing it, and the middle way approach. So the more we can hold on to our history and hold on to our past as an independent nation, the stronger will be our position, and I think the Chinese will feel more pressure. So this is very, very important.
Let's devote another few minutes on the question of middle way approach, which is the official stance of the Central Tibetan Administration. However, Beijing has not only categorically rejected the approach, but we have seen the model of one country, two system collapse recently in Hong Kong. Do you think Umelam approach is still viable given the circumstances?
Very much so. I'm fully with Umelam. I'm fully with resolving our dispute and our conflict with the Chinese government through dialogue. And yes, you're very right. The recent developments in Hong Kong further builds mistrust. And we have our own experience too, right? The whole 17 Peace Point Agreement is another clear example where the Chinese promised something but never lived up to their promises. But I think what people have to understand is Ume policy is not based on, on some kind of a deep trust or a belief, in the Chinese government, right? That we know. We know that the Chinese cannot be trusted. But Ume is based on a very realistic situation where we have to resolve the issue of Tibet because our people inside Tibet are suffering and there's widespread repression. And, there's such an imbalance of power, right? Because you're talking about 6 million Tibetans, against a state, against a power of over 1 billion people. So everything is really weighed against us. So the longer this conflict drags on, and there's a real risk that this will become, as some experts have called, a frozen conflict, where it takes a very long time, and the longer it takes, I think everything works in China's favor. So we really have to find some ways to resolve this issue, right? To have His Holiness return to Tibet, to his rightful home, and most of all, to really elevate the suffering of the Tibetan people. So that's why the Ume policy was formulated. and it comes from a very realistic place, and we have to, despite what the Chinese are doing, in Hong Kong and in the world in general, we have to go with the eyes wide open and just continue to, see if we can get to a resolution based on dialogue. Because uh, there's no way that the Chinese are going to give us, anything, without some kind of a negotiation and some kind of a compromise, right? So really, a very far-sighted policy that His Holiness envisioned, and I think it's the right policy. It's, we can always debate about it, and but it's in terms of the approach right now. I think that is what has enabled us to carry on, the movement, the freedom movement. And I think that's why also the CTA has been able to operate, in India, and the support that we've received so far. So I don't think, I don't think a change in that approach will get us any different result right now. Yeah.
Okay. My third question is about the migration of Tibetans from the Indian subcontinent to the West. The shifting demographic may pose serious challenges. Many believe that the shifting demographic may pose serious challenges to the Tibetan movement in India. The current administration has said that the issue is being closely watched and that it could both pose challenges and provide new opportunities. What is your take on the matter, and how do you plan to address it?
Okay, Choekyi, I'm always an optimist, and I have a bit of a contrarian view on this. Migration is going to happen, right? It has always happened in other societies, other communities, and our Tibetan community is no different. So we cannot put a stop to it, and we should welcome it, and we should deal with it, right? So I see a lot of opportunity that this movement of our people from essentially from South Asia to the West, a lot of opportunities that this situation presents. So what this will force the CTA and our community to do is a couple of things. First of all, the CTA needs to really reorganize and become more of a 21st century kind of organization. We need to go away from a focus exclusively on South Asia to more of a transnational approach. Secondly, the communities that are springing up in the West, primarily in North America, Western Europe, and Australasia, I think these are really wonderful assets that we have. And what I've been encouraging people to do is we need to really nurture, the growing base of young, talented, educated, leaders that are emerging, and we should encourage more Tibetans living abroad to get into, the services of their respective government, right? Whether it's in the foreign ministry or in the local, state, central parliaments and congresses. So the more leaders that we have, I think it's going to give us more opportunity and have more, people to really represent Tibet and push this Tibet issue forward. And similarly, in terms of development, right? I mean, we should really build bridges between the community in South Asia and those abroad in terms of having people go back and forth, so if people want to serve, if people want to, invest, I think, the CTA leadership should really provide avenues and a platform to do that. And through that, I think we can really come up with a model, a virtual model of governance where even though CTA is headquartered in Dharamsala and will continue to be based there till our issue is resolved, but CTA almost becomes like a virtual organization where we're able to extend, core programming into the communities living, in 30 plus countries. So CTA is very much present in all these communities, but in a very virtual way. And so we focus on culture, language, the freedom movement, leadership building, youth, early childhood. So anyway, I see a lot of opportunities. So I don't think we should be unnecessarily alarmed, or we just need to, I think, go along with the changes and just adapt and be more nimble and move into this digital domain in a very proactive way. And I think this will open up some really new possibilities, and it will, in fact, it will aid, it will assist our freedom movement. I don't think it's going to diminish the movement. So that's kind of my basic take on, what's happening in terms of migration.
Just to add, don't you think that as more Tibetans move from India, the position of CTA could also get weakened? Isn't that a challenge?
No, not necessarily, Shugila. I see this as an opportunity for CTA to reinvent itself, right? Because we cannot remain stagnant. We cannot remain in one mode of doing business. It worked so well for us over the last 60 years, but now there are internal, external developments, challenges, opportunities. So again, I think that the task ahead of the next Sikyong and the next Kashak and the next generation of Tibetan leaders is to how do we reinvent CTA from where it is now to more of a 21st century organization where we become more virtual. And that is why I've been talking a lot. I've also written on my website in terms of my manifesto and plans. I have a major initiative related to digital transformation and e-governance. I think, we are a very small community, right? Less than 200,000 people. So I think we have the opportunity, the possibility of really doing this well and coming up with a model which will not only be successful for us, but maybe other exile diaspora communities can look up to the Tibetans and maybe, I don't know, emulate or just study our model and just use it, for their own, communities as well.
But given that the Central Tibetan Administration is in India, Dharamshala, it cannot be the administration cannot be replicated anywhere else in the world, right?
No, Shukila, what I'm suggesting is remember in India and Nepal, we have a network where we have Dharamsala as the center, right? And then we have the 40 plus settlements in India and Nepal, and then we have the 7 departments. And especially the home department is the one that has all the settlement offices. I think there is an opportunity, Chugila, to replicate something similar. We already have the basic, I think, foundation already in place, but I think we need to think about this more, discuss more, have more meetings. But I can see a similar structure where the center is in Dharamsala, but then you have the various offices of Tibet, another very important cog in the whole network. And then you have the growing network of Tibetan community associations, right? Unfortunately, when I was in Dharamsala, last April we tried to have the first ever global summit of Tibetan, community associations, but due to COVID, we could not really hold it. But one of the major reasons why we wanted to have the meeting was to discuss, some of this future planning. So the network is very much in place. So I just think we need to flush this out a bit more and come up with a better, strategy, and where we can actually then have this structure where we have CT at the center, you have the Office of Tibet, you have the Tibetan associations, and this kind of a three-way kind of a pillar, and on which we can actually build a very vibrant, a very resilient, and a dynamic, global Tibetan community. So I'm very hopeful. I think we have the pieces in place, and we just need to have the right leadership, the right policies, and the right plan.
Okay. So my next question is more geared towards China. And as we know that there's a shift in global outlook towards China in the post-COVID-19 world, the growing hostility towards the Chinese government is quite obvious. How do you think we can capitalize on the world's changing outlook towards China?
Yes, this is so important, Shokila. Yeah, there is a dramatic change internationally with regards to how other countries now view China, right? We have for 60 years, we've been saying, listen, China is an expansionist power. You cannot trust China. China doesn't play by its rule. China believes in kind of this zero-sum, mindset. So everything that we've been saying, our narrative has been validated in over the last several months. As you can, as is so obvious what's happening on the Indo-Tibet border with China, what's happening in South China Sea, how China is threatening Taiwan, and the deepening Cold War between U.S. and US and China, right? So yeah, the international stage presents to the CTA and the Tibetan freedom an opportunity which we haven't really had, honestly, for a very, very long time. So I think what that's going to do is, in the past, it used to be very hard for our message to get across. The access was very hard for us. Whether Sikyong or some other Tibetan leader from the CTA or from the civil society, very hard to get official meetings, right? Usually either it doesn't happen or it happens, very kind of on the sidelines. But now I think there's opportunity to build direct relationship. And I'll give you a very small example. Back at the end of June, the U.S. government, for the first time, awarded direct funding to the CTA. The amount was not, huge, just $1 million US, but more than the amount, Choekyi, the significance of that development was, for the first time, the US government felt comfortable publicly supporting the CTA. So this is huge. So I think we should really build on that and increase the profile of the CTA. I can imagine a development in the months and years ahead where the Sikyong or somebody from the CTA is officially received by the State Department in the US, officially received by the EU, where the State Department or relevant, foreign governments actually mention the CTA in their official statement in terms of, yes, we've met, right? So I think we need to use this as a way to increase the visibility, the profile, and the support for the CTA. Because one thing that we have, which a lot of exile communities don't have, is a very viable central entity, right, which is leading the movement, which is representing the people. So I know there are people who have different views about in terms of CTA policies and this and that, but that's really, I think, what people should keep in mind is, at the end of the day, we all have a responsibility of supporting, the CTA, which represents all of us. So the more CTA can be out there and the more international support that we can build, I think it's going to just lift the entire movement. So the current international climate, thanks to the opportunity being given to us by the Chinese policies, we now have an opportunity to get the CTA out there, get the Tibet issue again out there to an audience that I think will be far more receptive to what we have to say than what the situation was as recently as a year or two ago.
Okay. My next question is about the exile community's unity. Over the last few years, as we know, it has been affected by a lot of infighting among Tibetans, which I think you would also agree that is clearly a problem. What will be your solution to this problem?
Well, Choekyi, first of all, my campaign slogan is, one nation, one people, one struggle. And above that, I've also been talking about one leader, one government, right? So my basic campaign message is, one of unity. And I'm just not using this as empty slogans. I really, if I get an opportunity to lead the CTA and the Tibetan freedom movement, I will bring people together. And I think the best way to do that is through example. I think you provide a kind of leadership where you involve everybody and, and you don't differentiate people according to, which group or which province or which religious sect they belong to, right? So personally, those were not the values that I was raised with, whether, in my family or among my, relatives and friends. I have never seen myself as really being aligned with any one group or one tribe or one sect. So when I interact with fellow Tibetans, the qualities I'm looking for are, is she capable, right? Is she hardworking? Is she can she deliver on the responsibilities that I give to her? So those are really what I'll be looking for when I assemble my kashak, when I assemble my, my other team. And all I can say is I have a track record of working together, building teams, delegating, right? And I'm going to just bring those same qualities but at a much higher level, right? So I'm not really too worried about this unity issue because, I think these things happen and, things sometimes get a little bit heated during election time. But I think at the end of the day, we have His Holiness who, 100, I think 99.99%, if not 100% of the Tibetans, truly believe in his leadership. And then we're so fortunate to have him, still with us, healthy, very much present. So under his overall guidance and kind of leadership, I think if we all work together and include everybody, and then I think we'll be okay. So I know people get, a little bit worried and upset because these days, unlike in the past, things are so instant, right? Somebody is able to write or say something just immediately and then nonstop, and it's like 24/7. So sometimes I think you feel like, wow, the sense of disunity, the sense of discordance is all around us. But I don't think it's any different from how our community was like 30, 40 years ago. I mean, back then too, we had issues, we had divisions. It was just that we didn't have social media that was amplifying, that was kind of throwing this out there in such a wide way. So I think we'll be fine. It's just that whoever comes as the next Sikyong, they just need to not just talk about unity, but I think we need to actually bring people together. So if I have a chance, I'll take the seniors, the youngers, right? And so that's one of the things I see about myself, which is a little different. I feel like I can be that bridging figure, because I'm not really that young, but also I'm not that old. So I feel like I'm of that age and of that generation, which can relate to both the elders and the younger people, and then take both of them along and really build on, uniting and kind of just all of us moving together. Yeah.
Which brings me to the next question. Out of all the Sikyong candidates, what vision and strategies do you think make you more suitable for this position?
Okay. Thank you, Shugila. This one is a very important question. I have respect for all the other Sikyong candidates. They all are, I think, in this out of the right for the right motivation. They have the experience, and they all have the individual plans, right? But for me, whether I become the Sikyong or whoever else becomes the next Sikyong, what do we need, right, in the next Sikyong? See, I think CTA, the internal workings of the CTA will be fine, right? I don't think we need someone that can do everything. So as long as somebody knows how CTA works, we can actually have one or two columns in the cabinet that can really just keep things running internally. Or we can appoint really good, competent secretaries for different departments, right? And plus, for somebody like me, I've been working inside the system in a very deep way at a very high level for the last 9 years, since 2011 to 2020. So the internal operations of the CTA, I think, is not a big deal. I think, I can run it. All the other candidates also, I think, will do a really good job. But where we really need to focus is externally. As we just discussed earlier, we have really once in a very, very long time opportunity, thanks to the aggressive and very expansionist policies of the Chinese government, we have an opportunity to leverage that and to advance the Tibet issue, to build new alliances, to mobilize support, right? So we need someone that can do that can represent the CTA, that can represent the Tibetan community, the Tibetan freedom struggle very effectively, and just, walk amongst the kind of the people who make decisions internationally, right, externally, be able to interact with them, be able to converse with them, and be able to get them, as many of them as possible to support you. And that's something which I feel very, very comfortable. I've been, in the US for for almost 20 years. And even in my last 9 years of having served the CTA, I had a lot of external dealings. I've worked with the highest level of government officials in the US, in the EU, in Canada. The other issue is funding, right? We need to raise resources because even though CTA is an exile government, we don't have any of the revenue sources that a normal government will have, right? Even the Green Book, which is the voluntary taxation program, not everybody contributes or participates in that. So we have very little ways of generating resources independently. So we have to continue to do what we can. But I think the bulk of the funding will continue to come from, governments and outside, donors. So we need again someone that can do that. And I have established over the last 9 years my track record in being able to do that. So really, the external is going to be more important than the internal. And even just within the community, right? The Tibetan community, as we were speaking earlier, is no longer confined to just India, Nepal, and Bhutan. Now we have over half of our people living abroad, and we're talking about multi-generation of Tibetans. There are Tibetans who are not very comfortable in the traditional way of how we do things, which is, or you can only do this if you are good in Tibetan, right? Or you have to come to the CTA to serve. Again, those are the things I was talking about in terms of how CTA needs to reinvent. We need to provide entry points for all Tibetans, who are willing and who are interested in committing to serving the cause and the CTA. So again, we need somebody that the younger Tibetans or the Tibetans who are not that involved in community to be able to relate. So again, I feel like because of my bilingual skills and my overall international exposure, I have that openness. I have that larger vision, which I'll be able to relate to, Tibetans living in the diaspora as well, and really trying to bring them together. So yeah, I feel like I have the qualifications and the profile which is needed for the next Sikyong.
Okay, so you just correct me if I'm wrong. You said that the internal environment of the administration is working. You said it's working fine, but many feel that the Central Tibetan administration needs fundamental changes and restructuring to move ahead with changing circumstances. You were the director of SAD and the North American representative before that. It is fair to say that you know how the setup works. What do you think are some of the changes needed, fundamental changes needed, in your opinion?
Yeah. I'm not saying change is not needed, but what I'm saying is those changes, if you have a plan, which I do, I think the execution will not be, super difficult because, it's a still a relatively small operation, and I think we can with both the Sikyong as well as having the right competent people in the Kasha, and especially at the department level, we can really make those changes, happen. So I'm not too worried. But yes, in terms of the plan, what do I intend to do? First of all, I've been talking a lot about this digital transformation, digital governance. I really feel that CTA needs to move very aggressively into the digital domain. Right now, the way businesses and activities are conducted within the CTA, it's very manual, it's offline, it's paper-based. So we need to now, move more to an online, to a more digital way of doing work and integrating technology. So the good thing is, during my time at SAD, we did start putting a plan in place, and also we were able to get funding from the US government. And we also brought in some outside partners like the Estonian government and, cybersecurity specialists in Canada and a development specialist in India. So all that is happening. So if I were to come to, the Sikyong's office, I will push that even more and expedite things further, right? So that's one key thing. The second thing is we really need to build the internal leadership. So I see a lot of potential, especially at the permanent CTA staff levels at the joint secretary and the deputy secretary. So I think we probably have around 100 or so of those people, but more if you add the entire CTA workforce of, teachers and others at the settlement. But just within Kanki, that joint secretary and deputy secretary level is so important because if we get those people on the right track, then they are the ones who will go on to become, secretaries, right, and department leaders. So again, I have a plan of training them, of just really kind of getting them on a path of professional development, which is very much needed. Then I think what's needed is more of a coordinated and better integration amongst the different departments, right? So, for instance, if you look at what we can do vis-a-vis the situation inside Tibet, I think the Tibet Policy Institute, the Security Office, and the Department of Information and International Relations need to, better, coordinate so that we have better data, better information about what's happening inside Tibet, and then we can proactively formulate, plans and strategies around that. Similarly, I think the communication strategy needs to be, further strengthened. So one of the plan I have is to really appoint a chief communication officer within the Department of Information and International Relations, where we just take an overall view of, how we can improve our communication strategy, right? So that we can actually come up with a very clear narrative, be it whether it's regarding middle way or whether it's regarding the overall CTA approach, political approach. Then I think we need to really make sure that our Tenzins, the officers of Tibet, don't become some kind of a glorified settlement office. Because what I see, what I'm a little bit concerned about is the 12 or 13 Tenzins that we have, an increasing amount of the Tenzins' time is being taken up by community-related issues in that country or in that region, right? Which is important. I'm not saying the Tenzins shouldn't be doing that, but that's not the main role of why we have an Office of Tibet, right? We need to really increase that political advocacy, that political representation role, which is happening, but I think we need to increase that further so that, especially certain Tenzins, right, which are located in very strategic areas, whether it's Washington, Brussels, Geneva, New Delhi, Taipei, and also I would say Tokyo. What else in terms of strengthening CTA? I think if I talk about development-related things, I have a whole, range of initiatives I would like to begin in terms of, if you go to my website, I have something called the 5 development principles that, any new Tibetan leadership should take into account. And first one is we need to really elevate promotion of language and culture. So any development project that CTA undertakes should really answer the fundamental question of, does this development project advance, promote, and strengthen Tibetan language and culture? So that should be the key objective. Secondly, I talked about integrating technology into every aspect of CTA's project and how it does its business. Thirdly, I look at consolidation, right? Since the community in South Asia is shrinking, I see that as an opportunity. I see that as an opportunity to move towards quality, whether it's education, have a fewer number of schools, whether it's settlements, clinics, right? We just need to now focus on quality, so that we can have some really excellent schools and excellent clinics. Similarly, the fourth principle is really about we need to move the Tibetan community from a place where right now it's all about welfare and entitlement to more of an investment kind of led approach. And this is, I think, a mindset, a cultural shift, which is going to be difficult. I think one of the bad things that has happened, Choekyi, is in 60 years of living in exile, our people have become very dependent, right? So they've become very dependent on handouts from the CTA, even though they may not need it. So there's about 15 to 20% of our population in exile, which are destitute. For them, any Sikyong, myself included, that might, come to the office in the future, will have to be fully responsible and have to take full care. But for the others, the economic situation has relatively improved, right, in the last many years. So for them, I think less is needed and less should be given. And so CTA's role should move away from being the primary provider to more of a facilitator, getting others involved, initiating public-private partnerships, and taking a more of an investment approach. Because otherwise, if you continue to dole out aid, people will not take initiative. People will not, kind of stand on their own feet, right? And then it'll just breed more dependency, and it's not good. So yeah, I have a lot of ideas of changes that we need internally. But again, I'll end with this again, saying that These are not very difficult to do. If you have a good plan and a good leadership at the top, the execution can be done by competent ministers and competent secretaries. The focus of the next Sikyong should not be on these things. I would say that he or she should spend almost 70 to 80% of the time externally, because the next 5 years, Choekyi, is very, very important. We have to move the political needle. We have to restart dialogue. We have to get the Chinese to, feel the pressure, and that they are not going to feel the pressure if all we do is become more administration, right? More involved with just the internal dynamics and the internal issues and the internal kind of, aspects of our community and our struggle. We have to move outward. We have to become more of a freedom movement kind of entity.
You talked a little bit about dependency on funds, US aid. I'll ask the question later. My next question would be about in your manifesto, you have placed a special emphasis on youth. You said you'll appoint a young person as one of the columns, create a new youth division within the Department of Home. Can you talk a little? Can you elaborate more on that?
Sure, sure. I've outlined five key issues, right? Even though a Sikyong has to, take care of everything, right? We don't have the luxury of only focusing on a few things. That's just not how it works. But if I become the Sikyong, I've outlined five key issues I'm going to prioritize. And what's common in all those five issues, Shakila, is I'm going to emphasize, I'm going to elevate in every possible way the role of the youth, because the only way that we can move the CTA into the 21st century, the only way we can kind of, reorient ourselves and take opportunities of the things that are there out there right now is by having new fresh blood, new fresh thinking, and that can only happen, I think, through youth, right? So yes, if I become the Sikyong, yes, what some of the things I'll do is I'll make sure that there's at least one, if not two, young, right, columns in the cabinet. Of course, it's not in my power. I can only nominate, and the
Yes.
parliament will have to support my, my selection, which I hope they will. I'm also going to have one, at least two women in there, right? Which is very, very important to bring in the gender thing. And then, yes, I haven't really thought about which would be the right department to house this new youth division. Maybe it's home department, maybe it's a combination of home and some other department. But yes, I will have a whole new division led by a secretary who is also a youth, 35 years or even younger, right? And all the different youth activities under the CTA will be coordinated by this new division. And then I'm going to build on the current Sikyongs. By the way, the current Sikyong, I think, has done a wonderful job of engaging, involving, and trying to provide more opportunities for our youth to get involved in the CTA and all aspects of the CTA's work. And I'll build on that. I'll further expand it. So things like the 550 Youth Forum, right, which I think will happen as it's happening now. I'm also thinking of having a 2 month, very high quality summer leadership program where youth from abroad and from India and Nepal will come, and over an 8 week period, they will go through, a real deep immersion into Tibetan history, Tibetan politics, international affairs, Tibetan culture, Tibetan language, Tibetan Buddhism. Because what we need to do is we need to build Tibetan, youth leadership and interest, right? And I'm also going to work with Tibetan youths abroad, to see how the CTA can help in terms of giving them opportunities in their own countries, right? I really believe in more young Tibetans getting into, whether it's the foreign service or whether it's in the government services of their countries. Of course, CTA doesn't really have any say in that, but I think I'm going to create awareness. I'm going to say, look, you have to get involved. You have to become leaders in your own, in your own countries, right? In your own parliaments, in your own governments. Because at the end of the day, I believe the more young Tibetans are there serving, whether in the CTA or in other foreign governments or foreign legislatures, just the fact that they are Tibetans, I think will make a huge, huge difference, right? We can work with them. They can also help us to raise more awareness about Tibet and build more support. What else? Yeah, I just think I'm going to create an environment where the young people feel encouraged, feel supported to come, and they find that it's a stimulating environment to work. And you don't have to know perfect Tibetan. You don't have to be, coming from any one group or anything. Everybody's going to be welcome. So that's the kind of environment I'm going to create. And so where you have the elders, kind of guiding and holding the hands of the young people, and the young people feel challenged, feel stimulated to work in the CTA. And not just the CTA, even those who are more comfortable working in the civil society space, I'm going to, just support them as well, in whatever way possible, whether through providing resources or just staying at the back and just, just being supportive in any way that's helpful.
Sure. So, to get back to the US aid, you have been very influential in raising and increasing the funds that the CTA has received from the US government. At the risk of sounding pessimistic, what happens when those funds run dry? I mean, that has happened before with the Tibetan guerrilla fighters, with the involvement of the US government. What are your thoughts on that?
Definitely. Good question, Choekyi. So I think I just wanted to explain a little bit, right? See, when the current Sikyong and when I came to Dharamsala in 2011, the Sikyong asked me to come and support and help, sort of join the team. What was the situation back then? In 2011, we did a very quick, just survey, and it became very clear that the amount of money that we were getting back then from the U.S. government was we just had one source, which was this PRM money for Tibetan refugees in Nepal and India, and it was about $2.5 million. At some point, it used to go up to 2.78. Some years it fell. So that was the only reliable source of U.S. government money coming in for the Tibetans. So what did we do? We started going to Washington, D.C. more frequently, right? And we started lobbying, we started advocating. And between 2011 to 2014, over those 3-year period, we were able to get kind of these one-off grants, like 2 years for education, 3 years for health, 2 years for cybersecurity, which was great. But these were like one-off grants, and it was great while it lasted, but then it always came to an end. So then what did the Sikyong and all of us, we met, we strategized, and we said, listen, we must come up with a more sustainable way of getting funding, right? And then as we consulted, as we discussed, it became very obvious that we needed to work with the US Congress and try to have a budget line item in the US budget itself, right? So we lobbied, we worked very hard, even though there were a lot of people who said, be grateful for what you're getting, right? This 2.5 PRM money and this one-off grants occasionally. They were saying like, oh, you're coming in at a time when the US government is cutting back and reducing funding across the board. So the chances of you all kind of getting like a separate budget line item is almost impossible, they said, right? But of course, we didn't believe in that. We worked hard. And what happened in 2014, we were able to get the US Congress. And in the 2015 budget, we got for the first time, Choekyi, a separate line item in the US budget. For initially it was for 3 million, and the next year it increased to 6 million. And ever since, every year now 6 million is in there. And then a couple of years later, we got another budget line item for 3 million. So right now we have $9 million that is there every year in the US budget. So why is that a big deal? It's a big deal because once you make it into the official budget line item, then it's quite hard to take it off, unless somebody is so opposed to Tibet and so opposed to the Tibetan community, or unless a government goes so close to the Chinese side, usually doesn't happen. So there's, I would say, even though it's not a foolproof, but there is much more security in terms of at least, expecting ongoing funding from the US government, just by the fact that we were able to put those, two budget line items totaling $9 million. So even though, yes, we may have a president, US president in the future who might just totally cut it off and the Congress might, agree with that. But the nice thing in the US system is as powerful as the US president is, he or she doesn't have all the power, right? The fiscal budgetary power lies with the Congress. And the Congress, thanks to His Holiness, right, and the efforts of the elder generation, we have enjoyed bipartisan support. So unless something very dramatic and drastic happens, I think the CTA and the Tibetan community can continue to, expect to receive funding from the U.S. Congress. But having said that, yes, we cannot be just reliant on, U.S. government or foreign government assistance because those can stop and probably will stop one day. So in the meantime, what are some of the other things I've proposed? I think this shrinking community in South Asia provides some wonderful investment opportunities, right? Yes, there was a policy in the previous Kelsang Dorjee term where, for the reasons and for circumstances that were present at that time, to initiate this privatization policy, right, where the CTA divested itself from doing business. But I think that policy needs to be revisited. And if I become the Sikyong, I'm going to revisit that policy. I'm not saying the CTA will run businesses, but I think CTA should really, wherever we have the competency and wherever wherever there's a lot of value, we should start investing in business. Because right now, the CTA reserves is just put in either a fixed deposit or in a very secure kind of low interest bearing instrument, right? And if you factor in inflation, we're actually generating negative return on, on the money that we have as a reserve. So I think we need to get into investments. We need to use the infrastructure and the resources that gets freed up through consolidation, whether it's fewer schools, land becoming available in the settlements. We need to really start businesses, right? We need to encourage businesses. We need to put those assets into more productive and monetize them, which I will. So it will always have to be a combination, Choekyi, of continuing to fundraise from foreign governments like the US, the Indian government, and other foreign governments, but also at the same time diversifying and looking at ways to generate resources independently, within the community and becoming a little bit more open. We cannot have this no to CTA business, no to CTA investments, right? I know people want to be secure and want to play it safe, but we have to take a little bit of a risk in order to make ourselves financially more sustainable.
Right. Okay. So my last question before we wrap up the interview, you touched upon many changes that you could bring to the office, but if you get elected, what will be your first big change in the office?
Well, in my first 100 days, Choekyi, I will, I'm going to look at how we can, this promise that I'm making, right? This pledge that I'm making of converting the CTA, transitioning it from more of administration right now to more of a movement. So I'm going to bring the right people. I'm going to assemble the right team, and I'm going to really back up my words, right? And not just for the sake of, sounding good during campaigning, saying the right things, but then it's business as usual, if I come into the Sikyong's office. So I'm really going to look at how I can revisit the entire CTA budget. Right now, I think my estimate is that out of each 100 rupees that, CTA spends, we only spend around 30 rupees directly into political, related work. The rest are very important also, but I'm going to change that. I will look at how we can shift more people, more resources into the political activities of, the CTA, and not just CTA, but also the movement in general, which is very, very important. So this is a huge shift, and I will begin looking into it right from day one. And within the first 100 days, I will try to come up with a plan of, at least how to do it. I don't think it can be done everything at the same time, but how do we break it down and then get the first phase, going, right? And this digital transformation, the digital governance, I'm really going to, I think a lot of progress will have been done by then because the current Sikyong also, has that same vision, and I know they're working very hard as we speak. But when I come into the Sikyong's office, I will really expedite that process, and I will make sure that, we become more digital, we integrate more technology, whether it's starting up a new e-learning division within the education department. And thanks, the good news is by then there will be, I think, an online charter payment system, which has been in the works for quite some time. But I know that the current Kashak and the finance department is working on it. So we will have that in place. And also, how do we, the way Kashak conducts its business, how do we digitize that so that, we move into some kind of a e-Kashak model, where we streamline and, we just really, and the whole bureaucracy, how we can actually reduce that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. We wish you a successful campaign in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Choekyi. Thank you, Payul. Thank you so much. Yeah.